Hello and welcome to Solar and EV Charger Co-op info session for the Richmond Solar EV Co-op. We're going to pause for about 30 seconds here, wait for some folks to join and then get started. So please stand by. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Aaron Such. I'm the Atlantic Southeast Region Director for Solar United Neighbors and Acting Virginia Program Director. I am joined by my colleague, Roger Horowitz, and we have a group of guest speakers. We have Charles Jarina from Drive Electric RVA, who's going to be presenting on Drive Electric RVA, electric vehicles and chargers, and Ruth Amundsen, who's going to be presenting on low-income solar options. So we're going to have a pretty busy presentation, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to just first recognize our partners with the City of Richmond. Unfortunately, they won't be able to present tonight, but we are collaborating with Don Alexsky and Michael Smart of the City of Richmond Sustainability Office, and with their RVA Green Climate Equity Action Plan and 2030 Residential Solar Plan, which is a very forward-looking plan and very comprehensive. So just a good example of that, which they could probably allude to more, is it shows different pathways. And of course, one of them is buildings and energy, shows a lot about residential energy burden, equity, and the different installation incentives and access that can really benefit the city of Richmond. So I think Roger is going to throw the direct link in the chat if you want to learn more, but really wanted to just thank them for their collaboration and forward-looking, very thorough plan that, of course, includes solar on buildings, on homes and businesses, as well as electric vehicle charging. I'm going to go ahead and also call out one of our collaborators, and that's Veridiant and Andrew Grigsby. So we're really excited to be partnering with them. They work in solar, but also in home energy efficiency. So one of the strategies is to reduce consumption so that solar can meet more of your home's load. What they offer is expert inspections and reports starting between $175 or $300. That covers heating, cooling, insulation, ductwork, hot water, smart home technology, air quality and ventilation, as well as solar. So they have helped quite a bit of clients. And before I went solar in 2022, I called up Andrew and he gave me a really extensive list of all the things that I could do to make my home more efficient. My home was built in 1968, so there was a lot of low-hanging fruit. He also connected me to a partner, a contractor that does high efficiency HVAC systems, and I put in a mini split, ducted mini split heat pump. So again, really helpful partner. And if you need to get in touch with Andrew or Veridiant or any of the services that they offer, we have their contact right here. So I'm going to, oops, I was supposed to go into Charles, but before we get started, just wanted to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded and that if you have a question, please direct it to the chat. And after each section and presenter, we'll stop for some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow Charles to talk a little bit about Drive Electric RVA. If Charles looks familiar, chances are you've probably seen him before if you visited our website or a lot of our materials, because Charles was a co-op member in 2016 here in Richmond, put solar on his roof. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Charles at Drive Electric RVA to talk about their initiatives.
Thanks for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about our group. And I promise I won't keep you for too long because I know you're all here to learn about solar. I was just sharing my experience recently about going to one of these sessions and learning more about solar and how much information I got out of it. So I definitely don't want to stand in the way of that. But thought I'd just tell you a little bit about Drive Electric RVA. We've been a longtime partner with Solar United Neighbors, both when they were just doing solar and then when they started including the EV charger. Because solar, PVs, photovoltaic and EVs go very well together. And I'll touch on that briefly too. So just a little bit about, I'll just tell you a little bit about my story. And Aaron was talking about this picture. I feel like yeah, my face is a lot of places around here, but that's my solar system on my house. And I went solar in 2016 through the Sun Co-op, one of the first Richmond ones. And you can see in the tiny little white car in the driveway there is a Nissan Leaf. That was my first EV that I bought 2 years prior in 2014. I have a Chevy Bolt right now. And we started our journey with the electric car, I had wanted to save money on gasoline. Fuel prices were pretty high then; they're even higher now. I also wanted to reduce the amount of pollution and things I was putting in the environment that has a negative impact on the climate. And so bought the car, and then not long after that, we started talking about, well, the electric grid is getting greener. Electric cars are very efficient users of energy compared to gasoline cars. So even in the parts of the country with the dirtiest grids, EVs still emit less carbon than gasoline powered equivalent does. But we wanted to take it a step further and decided to go solar and did some research. I spent a couple of years kind of going, my wife and I kind of doing, talking to people who had solar and so forth, and just didn't quite have enough information to kind of go to make the choice. And then when we had heard about the co-op, we went to I said, I'll go to one of the info sessions, no commitment, and get the information, bring it back, and we can talk about it. And I was able to answer questions, get questions answered, and I felt much more comfortable, especially the model of the co-op, and they'll go into more of this in the presentation. But it was definitely very appealing to me. Plus the fact that I could, potentially save on the system that we were going to buy. So with 2016 we went solar, and so our group we started in 2014. I mentioned, and we do a variety of activities to promote electric vehicles as a fun, practical, and sustainable transportation choice in the Central Virginia area. And so we sort of have three sort of buckets of what we do. We do outreach. So we do a variety of public events to try to put electric vehicles in front of people so they have opportunity to see the technology up close. They can sometimes get an opportunity to get in the car, to take a ride in it or test drive in it, to get that experience of the differences in EVs in terms of the quiet and the performance, and see that and experience that on their own. And also the chance to talk to EV owners and learn from their experiences and ask the questions and get the full story, and not necessarily just the sort of the highlights reel that you might get from a salesperson at the auto dealership. And so we try to be where people are. We go to farmers markets. We also do our own events for National Driver Electric Week and some other specialized events, but mostly it's just showing up where people are gathered and bringing the technology to them. In terms of education, our highlight, we do a variety of things to get people on the same page in terms of like what electric vehicles are, the basics of charging and that sort of thing. The centerpiece of that is our EV experience, which is an exhibit that we developed that has infographic panels that talk about the basics of going electric, compares EVs on price, efficiency, performance, and environmental impact. So it gives people, and it's aimed for people who are in the market for a vehicle, but maybe have information gaps to fill. And sometimes it's hard to get those gaps filled at an auto dealership. It's still a relatively new technology. And so the dealer may not necessarily all the latest information. And so we try to design the exhibit to sort of fill in that information gap so that when they go and they're ready to buy a car, that they have the information they need, make things a little bit easier for the salespeople as well when they're selling the car. And so we actually have our exhibit hosted right now at Recharged on West Broad Street. And I encourage you, to you can just go in there and just check out the exhibit, and they will not harass you about buying a car. They specialize in carrying new and used electric vehicles, but then certainly you can see the cars that are on the lot. They're all electrics and plug-in hybrids. But they were very interested in educating the public, and so it was a very good partnership there. Uh, and then another thing we started doing in the education front, which I just decided to throw in here, is we started doing a YouTube video series where we race die-cast versions of electric vehicles. And when we do our public events, we get the kids and the grown-ups involved and racing the cars, and they have fun doing that. And then we record some of them and edit them together and put them on YouTube. But I put that in the education bucket because it's a way of, we do it in a way that we educate, we drop in information about what makes electric vehicles different and special in terms of performance and speed and and the cost of maintenance, that sort of thing, while doing the racing. And so it's a sort of a different approach that we're taking to sort of have, get the message out there, get the information out there in a way that's fun. And then lastly, the advocacy bucket. We do through our Virginia Conservation Network, which we're a member of. We basically realized that we needed to, in addition to encouraging people to consider going electric and providing the information they need to make the right choices for them, that we also need to put policies in place to kind of support that and make sure that the vehicles that are on the market are available here in Virginia, and that when you buy a car and you go to charge it somewhere, that there isn't somebody there that's finished charging and they decide that they're going to use it as a parking spot and they don't move, or worse yet, somebody with a gas car decides to just block it just to be mean about it. And that's been an issue in other parts of the country, particularly in California, where there's a lot more EVs. And so one of the things we did this last year was work with the Sierra Club to have a parking regulation put into place, so that way there's a fine involved if you park your car without and you don't have the intention of charging. We're looking at supporting other policies going. We don't do this as our primary activity, but we do feel like we do as EV owners and enthusiasts to represent our interests in General Assembly and on a national level as well. Well, that's basically all I wanted to say about our group. And obviously, if folks have questions about EV charging, the relationship between EVs and PVs, I will say, the question that comes up the most is like, which one should I do first? And it all depends on what you think is important. If you're already considering going solar, there's no reason why you should I better buy an EV first, go solar, and then, you can look at the cars in the market and decide, if you want to essentially generate free fuel for yourself. I make sure that I charge my car in the first thing in the morning, so that the power that my panels are generating going right into my vehicle. But maybe you already have an electric vehicle. You might want to consider going solar. There's a lot of people that I know that do both, and you shouldn't necessarily feel pressure to do both of them, but there's a natural connection between the two of them, and there's really, it all depends on budget and timing, where you're living and that sort of thing, that would decide which one you should do first. But they definitely are complementary activities, and we need to do everything that we can in terms of changing, how our transportation sector functions and that sort of thing. So I'll leave it there. And if other people obviously have questions about EVs or EV charging or all that, you certainly feel free to let me know. So thanks for having me here.
Hey, thanks a lot, Charles. So just two things. I just wanted to recognize how great of an advocate you are. Like the spirit of Drive Electric RVA is you all do a lot of public events and, welcome people. So there's just a whole, just a slew of information at your public events. And you really cultivate a lot of excellent ambassadors, people that are able to talk about cars. The EVs are not just Teslas. So you get all sorts of great people there. Last question is, can you put the best way to contact you in the chat or Drive Electric RVA?
Absolutely, I would definitely do that.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Solar United Neighbors, go into the presentation, which we're going to talk about how the co-ops work, the technology and financing. Then we're going to bring on Ruth Amundsen from Norfolk Solar Fund and Sunspots to talk about how folks who are low or moderate income can also get free or greatly reduced solar panels. So it's going to be fun. So what is Solar United Neighbors, or who are we? We're a vendor neutral national 501c3 nonprofit that kind of started by accident. So the story of us is that in 2007, our founder, Anya, who's pictured there, saw the movie Inconvenient Truth with her son and was motivated to take action. They thought the best way to take action on climate change was to go solar on their row house in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of Washington, D.C. So this was 2007. They found the process to be really, really challenging. They didn't know what the components and the proposals were. Also, solar was 5 times more expensive than what it is now. So she thought she was being a smart mom and saying, hey, if this is so hard, let's take the whole neighborhood solar. Thought that was going to be a non-starter, but underestimated her son's ability for community organizing. He turned it into a project, put flyers on all the neighborhood doorsteps, got about 100 people together and said, hey, if you want to figure it out as a group, maybe leverage our numbers for discounts and kind of work as a team, would you be willing to do it? Well, after 2 years, they took nearly 50 homes in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of Washington, D.C. solar. So Solar United Neighbors actually started out as people asking Anya to replicate that success story in other areas of Washington, D.C. and across the country. So when I started here in 2014, we were still working out of our house. We were 4 people and an intern. Now, fast forward to 2023, we have members in all states. We do a lot of action, a lot of advocacy in all states. We have 11 on-the-ground programs as well as in states, as well as a program in DC, as well as Puerto Rico. We've run a lot of solar co-ops, and you could think of the solar co-op spirit is just a bunch of neighbors joining together to figure it out as a team, support each other, and leverage a good discount. So our impact is something that we're really incredibly proud of. Again, as I mentioned, on the ground, that's actually incorrect. It's 11 states as well as Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. We've helped it's getting close to 9,000 families go solar. And that's about, well, this is a little bit out of date, 70 megawatts worth of installed capacity. That's an industrial scale level of solar on individual rooftops. Here in Virginia, we've done over 1,200, probably approaching 1,300 installations, more than 10 megawatts worth of installed capacity. And our goal is an equitable energy system that directs control and benefits back to local communities. And solar is uniquely positioned to do that. And I'll explain why when we talk about the technology. Our theory of change is a circular theory of change. So many organizations might do one of these. We do 3 of them. So we help people go solar. We give support with new or existing systems, either through the co-op. We also have a help desk. So if a co-op isn't a good fit for you in terms of timeline or geography, we give free support for people that want information for new or existing systems. We help folks join together. What we found is that solar owners are all different demographics. So they like to connect with other people, share resources. In Virginia, we have a really great, vital listserv, which is an online discussion forum for practical solar installation, solar information about installations, policies. It's a really great resource. And then social events. One of the things that I've been most proud of our work in Virginia is that we have the most happy hours of any of the states that we work in. But in all seriousness, we do like to join people together and found that solar is a big tent in which a lot of people fit under. Lastly, we fight for energy rights. We are very fiercely focused on practical things like net metering. In 2020, we passed a piece of legislation that made it harder for homeowners associations or HOAs to block solar on the rooftops there. And we're one of the only organizations that represent solar owners. We are not an environmental group per se, although many of us, almost all of us, are motivated by the environment. But what we represent is somebody that wants solar on their home or has solar on their home or wants to participate in solar energy one way or the other. And this is a nonpartisan, very broad demographic. So we get all sides of the political spectrum that come together for solar, which is kind of refreshing in these divided times. So that's what we are. Again, we'll talk about today how solar co-ops work as the first section. talk more about solar technologies, batteries, EV chargers, which are included as part of this group. And then solar economics, Ruth is going to join us again from Norfolk Solar Fund and Sunspots to speak about low and moderate income solar and how folks in those ranges can apply. So how do solar co-ops work? Well, you could think of it as a voluntary buying group that leverages a number of people. In fact, think of it as a voluntary buying group that gets 50 or 100, 150 people together, work together as a team, leverage a discount on the installation through economics of scale, and then get the support and the tools to make an informed decision. We see solar kind of like a vehicle purchase. It is a big ticket item. So you should, as a consumer, have all of the tools to make those decisions. You should understand the pricing. You should understand the components and also understand what your specific needs are. Maybe you're going to have an electric vehicle purchase in the future. Maybe you need battery backups for medical equipment. So we believe that we're not doing our job unless you have the tools to make that informed decision. And then I mentioned before, we connect you with fellow solar owners and enthusiasts, and you become part of a growing solar movement. There is no obligation. And what we found is that some people really, after going through the co-op, want to help advocate to help other people go solar. Maybe they want to provide testimony for legislation or share their stories like Charles has done here. So we give you those options, or if you just want to be left alone after you get your solar panels, that's okay as well. So we divide our solar co-op process into a couple different phases. And you could think of it as something that has a beginning, middle, and end, typically 8 to 10-month process. So the first stage as a participant, you're probably thinking, what should I do? Well, congratulations, you are doing the first step, which is attend a free solar co-op info session. Learn if it's a good fit for you. Learn what the pricing is, what the components. It may or may not be a good fit for you to go solar through the co-op, but you should have that information. The second part is to sign up online. And I'm going to have Roger, if you haven't already, put the link to sign up to the co-op. It's a free, no obligation. And once you sign up, we're going to screen your roof remotely, make sure it's a good fit for solar. And if it is, welcome you into the group. And then that's going to cue our welcome series. It gives you a lot of information, the basics of solar. It might almost be redundant, but again, as I mentioned, we want to give you all those tools to make an informed decision. Now, as we grow the group, we try to get about 20 or 30 people before we move on to our next phase. That's when we select the installer. Once the co-op has 30 members or so, what we'll do is we'll issue a request for proposal, which basically says, hey, we've got 30 people that are interested in solar. We're going to grow the group right now. And we bid that out to local installers and say, hey, give us a competitive price, knowing that you're going to get economics of scale. You're going to get very well-suited homes for residential installations or small commercial. So we issue that RFP. We do all of the due diligence, and then we get a volunteer co-op member committee to review the bids and select a single installer. And that's actually where we're at right now. We just got 4 competitive bids on the group. And if you join today, or if you're a current member, then you can volunteer to be a member of the selection committee. So these groups are very stakeholder driven. It's the participants that make those decisions, i.e. you. And so you're going to select a single installer at that selection committee. Sun is going to do all of the due diligence. So we're going to put the bids together. We're going to put them in a spreadsheet and help you unpack all of the very technical information. So by the end of the night, you're going to have an installer selected. So once the installer is selected, they're going to reach out to the to members at the information that they provided when you signed up for the group. So they'll send you an email or maybe even call you and say, hey, yeah, we're the selected installer. You also get some information from us giving a summary of the component package and the pricing that the installer offers. And they're going to probably ask for, the first thing is a copy of your utility bill that has your energy consumption usage. They're going to take a look at your roof and either visit you, give you a call, or email you a pre-proposal based on the co-op pricing. Now, the co-op pricing is customized based on your particular needs. It kind of falls under a package. Think of like buying a car. They may offer a basic panel package, maybe some upgraded high efficiency panels or battery storage or EV charger, but that's going to come in at the co-op pricing. And it's kind of like a sale because the installers are offering very competitive pricing, so it's not fair to ask them to extend that indefinitely. This is definitely not street pricing. So you have 30 days to sign that proposal. But at any moment, that's when you can contact us, give us a call or an email. We can help you review that proposal. Let's also say you are a very informed consumer and you got 2 or 3 other proposals outside of the co-op. We'll help you understand those and compare that to the co-op proposal and make a decision that makes the most sense to you. So again, you have that proposal, 30 days, there's no obligation. And if it's a good fit, then you sign the proposal at the co-op price, and it's just between you and the installer. It'd be the same as if you went with an installer outside of the co-op. The difference with the co-op is you come in at a discounted price and you get the support through before, during, and after the process. The installation itself is relatively quick, 1 or 2 days, and then we move on to my favorite part, which is the celebration party, where all of the co-op members that installed solar, those that didn't get together and share their stories. So again, about a 9 to 10 month process, voluntary buying group, a lot of it's learning. Selecting the installer is based on the co-op participants. And then you sign a contract. It's just between you and the installer. The difference being with the co-op is it comes at a discounted price and support through the process. So I'm going to stop here and see if there are any things any questions or clarifications that I can take care of.
No questions so far, Aaron.
All right. Thanks, Roger. Yeah, so we'll try to move at a good clip, get you out of here maybe a little bit after 7, cover everything that we need to. So solar technology. So there's 2 different ways you can harness the sun's energy. You can harness the sun's light, which is what a solar photovoltaic or PV panel does. It converts the solar energy to electricity. There's also harnessing the sun's heat, which is like solar hot water. We're going to be focusing on solar PV, which is a combination of 2 words, photo and voltaic, like light. Photo means light, voltaic is voltage. So that's the technology that the co-op is going to be focusing on. So a solar system is a series of components. The most common one is a panel, or an installer might call it a module. They are anywhere between now about 4 feet by 4 by 6, weigh about 40 pounds, and they're measured in wattage. So like the old incandescent light bulbs, if you bought a 50-watt light bulb, that would consume 50 watts. Panels are measured in the wattage that they are instantaneously capable of producing. So a 400-watt panel at its maximum highest output will produce 400 watts. Now, very rarely would you just have one panel. For your home or business, you would have a solar array, which is measured in 1,000-watt increments. So if you had 4 250-watt panels, that would be a 1,000-watt or a kilowatt system. So your panels are measured in wattage, and your solar arrays are measured in 1,000-watt increments. So you have your panels. Again, as I mentioned, systems measured in kilowatts. Your electricity production is going to be measured in kilowatt hours, and they are like apples and oranges. And it really just depends on the system size that you have in kilowatts, as well as the way that your system is sited. What we see here in Virginia is an average size of about 6 kilowatts to 7 kilowatts. It's based on your site goals, your consumption, and there really is no perfect answer for what you need, and I'll explain why that's important here in a second. So kilowatts, system size, kilowatt hours is production. The next component is going to be your inverter. So your solar panels produce direct current, but your homes or business use alternating current, or AC. So what an inverter does is convert that DC, direct current, to alternating current, so it's usable. And there's a couple different types of technologies. There's a string inverter, which is typically an older type of inverter technology. It's used mostly for ground-mounted systems and commercial. And most commonly, what you see now are a string inverter with a DC, or direct current optimizer, or a microinverter. And the string inverter with the optimizer and microinverters, they allow panels that are shaded to not drag down the performance of other panels. That's the actual disadvantage of a string inverter. kind of like old Christmas lights. If you had one poorly performing, it would drag down the rest of the light's performance. String inverter with DC optimizer, Solar Edge is the most common brand for that, as well as a microinverter. Enphase, which is most typical in installations in Virginia, will address that issue. The other thing that's good with an advantage of DC optimizer or microinverters is when you go solar, you're going to have a brand new toy, and that's going to be your online monitoring system. So a string inverter with optimizers or microinverter allows you to monitor the production of each individual panel, as opposed to a string inverter, which does the whole system. And your installer is going to give you the inverter, typically just source a single inverter. So you have your inverter, your panels. How does it mount to the roof? So this picture right here is a asphalt shingle roof, which is the most common that you see in Virginia. You may have a standing seam metal roof, which if you drive by the Wawa gas stations, that's a good example of it. Or maybe a flat rubber TPO membrane roof, which you see commonly in row houses. All of these have racking solutions that are able to be affixed to them. So your installer is going to take a look at your roof and say, okay, that's an asphalt shingle or a membrane roof. We have a racking solution for that. The one roof that does not easily couple to solar is a slate roof. So if you have a slate roof, some installers simply will not install on it because it's a challenging installation, or they might charge a substantial fee more. Substantial fee more than what you would normally pay for a typical roof installation. And here you see a standing seam. Standing seams are nice because the racking just stands, or that mounts right to the seam, no roof penetration. Yeah, so moving on to how does solar connect to my electric panel? It's very simple connection in the panel. Most homes do not need upgrades before solar, but if they do, then solar installer can do that upgrade, or they can work with an electrician that you currently work with. All right, so what is a good roof for solar? Again, when I mentioned that we do a roof screening remotely when you sign up for the co-op, what are we looking for? So we're looking for roof orientation. The most ideal orientation here in Virginia is facing south, or in the northern hemisphere. As you're facing south, you're facing towards the equator. So it's going to maximize your exposure to the sun. You could still go solar on a west or an east facing roof. You're just going to have slightly less production. What you want to avoid is your best roof orientation, or that your most unshaded roof orientation be facing north. When you face north, you're facing away from the equator, and you're going to have substantially less production. So not really worth the investment. Number two, what are we looking at in terms of shading, right? So it's pretty obvious that the panels need to be exposed to sunlight. So if you have trees or big dormers or gables that shade the solar panels, then we're going to be on the lookout for that. And it's a little bit tricky. It's more of an art rather than a science, because the sun is at different angles during certain times of the day or during certain times of the season. But a basic rule of thumb is you want your best exposed surface to be roughly between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. to have a relative unshaded access to the sun. Number three, is there enough space to mount panels? So as a basic rule of thumb, we're looking for about 200 square feet of unobstructed roof space. Again, that's not facing north, that has unshaded access to the sun. So you want to make sure you have a big enough roof that's going to be able to accommodate those panels. And then number four, the panels themselves are warranted 25 years. They have no moving parts. So they're going to be up on the roof for a while. So you're going to want to make sure that your roof has enough life on it. What you want to avoid is placing panels on the roof and then having to uninstall them, store them, and then reinstall them if you're re-roofing. So a simple rule of thumb is if you have 10 years or less on your roof, then you're going to want to go solar either after you replace your roof. I mentioned roof-mounted systems here in Richmond. That's a majority of the installations, but let's just say you don't have a great roof for solar. You live a little bit further out there and you have plenty of space for a ground-mounted system. The co-op does offer those ground-mounted options. The advantage of a ground-mounted system, again, is if your roof doesn't have a good surface, it's not well-oriented, and you have the space and the land, you could put those panels out there, tilt them optimally, and optimally have them facing into the south. The disadvantage is they're slightly more expensive. So you can see in this picture that the racking system does have to be built, has to be sunk into the ground. So they are slightly more expensive, but you can also get a little bit better production out of them. And again, that's part of the offering for the group. All right, so frequently asked questions, warranties. So the components are warranted. I like to think of the solar as a generator with no moving parts, a free source of fuel, and a 25-year plus expected lifespan. The panels have a production warranty of 25 years or more. The industry standard, or 25 years, excuse me. The industry standard is 80% production. So after 25 years, they should at least produce at least 80% of their nameplate capacity. So if you have a 100-watt panel, it should produce at least 80 watts. Your inverters, depending on the technology, have a 10 to 25-year warranty. The microinverters themselves are 25 years. And the warranties from the installers in Virginia range about 5 to 10 years for workmanship. So what's a workmanship warranty? It's a roof penetration, it's a wire run, it's anything that they have done. Well, homeowners insurance, what you are going to want to do is when you go solar is let your homeowners insurance company know. I did that. I did not see a rise in my premiums. In fact, it's pretty rare. If you do let your insurance company know and you see a substantial spike in your premiums, look at getting another insurance company. There are a few that just aren't with the times, and majority of the homeowners insurance, you're going to see very little rise in premiums, but you are going to want to report it as a home improvement. I mentioned maintenance before. Pretty low maintenance. You're going to be checking your system, your solar app, your application, which is going to tell you what your panels are producing. I promise that's going to be your new toy. I look at it at least once or twice a day. It's going to tell you if your system's functioning. We say it's a little maintenance system. It is a good idea to get somebody up there on the roof maybe every 3 to 5 years, just make sure there's no squirrel damage. That's actually the biggest culprit right now here in Virginia for people's systems, squirrels or any nesting creature that's going to be maybe going through the wiring. So pretty low maintenance. I mentioned how long the systems last, 25-year plus. And again, just keep an eye on it, but not a lot of maintenance. You know, if it's snowing, we recommend don't even get up there on the roof and sweep the snow away. It's going to melt. It's a safety hazard. So, yeah. Will my HOA allow solar on my home? So I mentioned before about our advocacy efforts. So in 2020, Solar United Neighbors worked with the industry and a lot of our solar homeowners to pass a law that made it harder for HOAs to restrict solar on their homes. And what it is it defines what's an unreasonable restriction according to the law. So if the original, or if they dictate a restriction like, hey, the panels have to be on the back of the house or not visible from the street, if it reduces the production by 10% or more over the originally quoted system, it's unreasonable. Or if it increases the price of the system by 5% or more. So it's by decreases production by 10% or more, or increases the price, means it's an unreasonable restriction and it is illegal via law. So what if I'm in a historic district? Typically, it is based on line of sight. So just speak with your installer before, make sure that they're able to pull all the permits and that you're going to get your system approved. All right. So one of my favorite questions, probably the most common question that we get at Solar United Neighbors is, how much is my system, or how many panels do I need, and how much is my system going to cost? And it's really a challenging, it's almost impossible question for me to answer honestly, because I don't know the amount of energy that you consume. The first thing an installer is going to ask for is a copy of your utility bill. That has a history of your annual consumption. And then they're going to look at your roof or your property to see how many panels or what size system they can fit. And you don't have to go all or nothing on a system. You don't have to produce 100% of your annual electricity from solar. Some people have 50% of their energy from solar if they have a small roof. I have pretty much all electric appliances, an electric vehicle that I plug in, and I have a really small roof. I get about 80% of my annual energy from solar. And what enables this is that a majority of the systems are grid tied. So they tie into the electric grid. So at night or during periods of low production, you're getting your energy from the grid. So if I were to follow this schematic, number one, your solar panels absorb energy from the sun. Number two, remember our friend, the inverter converts the energy from the sun to direct current. And then, your inverter converts the panel DC energy to alternating current. So it makes it usable. It's a power conditioning device, conditions it so it's usable. And then that energy is used instantaneously, right? So pretty sunny day today, you have your panels working, you may have your computer plugged in, your refrigerator, your electric vehicle is charging. That energy is used instantaneously. Well, on a grid-tied system, most people do not use batteries. Well, what happens if you're on vacation for 2 months or 2 weeks during the summer? You have nothing, barely any appliances plugged in. What happens to that electricity? Well, you're sending that excess electricity to the grid, kind of like rolling your meter, spinning your meter backwards, and you're getting a full value credit for what you produce, but don't use instantaneously. So that energy goes to your neighbors, maybe the gas station down the street, but you're going to get a full retail value for that credit of energy that you send back out onto the grid. And that's called net metering. And net metering is an incredibly important incentive for solar. So just going through the basics, you're going to get a one-to-one credit. Remember, your energy is measured in kilowatt hours. That's the unit. It's the same unit that you're billed for on your bill from your utility. So in Virginia territory with Dominion, Appalachian Power Electric Co-ops, the average price per kilowatt hour is about 11 to 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So you're going to get that full value for the energy that you send out to the grid at that value. With a system, you're going to have daily or seasonal surpluses, right? So if you're at work or nobody's during the house during the day, you might have a daily surplus or even a seasonal surplus. During the fall and spring months is typically when people build up a lot of their credits for kilowatt hours. The heating and cooling loads are less intense, and you actually have longer, cooler days. Actually, panels are more efficient on cooler days than they are on warmer days. So remember, it's an annual billing cycle that is based on the time that you interconnect your system. So if you interconnect your system in, let's just say July, your annual billing cycle is going to be from July until June, that full billing cycle. It's not based on the calendar year. That's really important. And remember, you're going to have a percentage of annual offset. And like what we say is some people go 100%, or maybe they even do a little bit more because they're going to purchase that electric vehicle or they're going to electrify their appliances, switch out from gas, which is a great idea. But some people are just as happy going solar with 40 or 50% of their electricity annual offset. And that's actually where energy efficiency can also be your friend too. So in general, the rational way to do things is to do energy efficiency first and then solar second. I used to have a boss that says energy efficiency is your vegetables and solar is your dessert. So you have to eat your vegetables first and then your dessert. But most people aren't incredibly rational. You might have figured this one out. So they'll go solar because it's something they want to do, and then also maximize the production of that energy system through simple energy efficiency things. So that's just as fine. And it allows you to do a percentage of your annual offset because you're consistently connected to the grid. And then here's just a simple example of what an electric bill with the net metering looks like. If you produce or if you consume 300 kilowatt hours of electricity per month, but your solar system produces 250 kilowatt hours, you're just going to pay for those 50 kilowatt hours. Or if you consume 250 kilowatt hours but produce 300, you might have a balance that's going to accrue to your next month. Kind of like rollover minutes when cell phones used to do that. You're going to apply those surpluses to your next bill for the course of the billing cycle. You're going to still pay your fixed connection charge. So in Dominion, it's about $6.58, even if you produce all of your monthly energy from solar. And as I mentioned, surpluses are carried over month to month. and it's based on the interconnection date, the date in which your system is turned on, not the calendar date. So people often confuse that. Hey, it's January, I should have my full net metering credits. Well, if your system was interconnected in June, that's going to be your billing cycle when it starts. All right. So the grid-tied systems have a lot of advantages. The one disadvantage is that when the power goes out, your solar is not going to work. So I'm going to repeat that. It's a common misconception that if you don't have battery storage, if you have solar panels, they're going to still work. You're going to need battery storage in order to have working panels during a grid outage. And the reason is that it's a safety mechanism. I mentioned before that your panels are going to be backfeeding the grid. If the utility has linemen out there working on it, that's going to be a safety issue. So in the inverter, there's an automatic safety mechanism that shuts it off. So here in Virginia, we have relatively reliable power, but if you want to have backup power during an outage, you're going to need battery backup. Also, if you have a gas generator, solar will play fine with a gas generator, just placed separately. So you can have your solar panels also use a gas generator for backup or batteries. What are the value of battery storage? We're seeing more interest in it. If you have frequent utility outages, some areas on the distribution grid are just a little bit more remote or they're just not as reliable. If you have critical loads at home, so say you have medical equipment or a well pump that you need to consistently have, you can't go without. And what we've seen is that solar with battery backup is the best way to keep the lights on in emergency and disaster preparedness scenarios. We work in Florida as well as Puerto Rico, and we have seen excellent performance. And for example, during Hurricane Fiona, we had people tell us that their battery, this was in Puerto Rico, their battery storage worked perfectly, kept the lights on during extended grid outages as well as Florida. Now, the disadvantages are cost and complexity. So adding a battery is going to add more of a cost of component. It's also going to add a little bit more of a complexity in terms of design. So again, it's up to you to make those decisions for you. Right now in Dominion territory, we have what's called a time of use incentive, which is basically, a fancy word for it is energy arbitrage, but it varies the price of electricity in kilowatt hours based on supply and demand. So if you have that time of use scenario or that time of use pricing, you could actually use your battery to store energy when it's electricity is cheap and expensive during the day, and then discharge it at night during peak times. But that's not very widespread. It's also in the pilot stages right now. So maybe in the future you could get an additional revenue stream. But the basic value for battery storage is it's like that backup generator when the grid goes out. And I think Roger might have shared this in the chat already, but we have a battery storage guide for homeowners. Again, a lot of really into the weeds things that we're able to share, and again, help you make that decision that makes the most sense to you. I'm going to stop here for a second before I go into EV chargers as part of the co-ops and see if there's any questions that I can field.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, Robert said that lives in a 100-year-old house in the Fan District in Richmond, and that the solar company gave an estimate, signed a contract, but the company said that even though the roof is doing fine, you need a roof replacement because they insure against roof leaks for 10 years, but it's a flat roof and it's in good condition, but replacing a flat roof is more than the cost of solar. So he decided not to go forward. So I want to know if you had any thoughts on that. Yeah, great. Any experience with that kind of thing?
Yeah, those old fan row houses, they're beautiful, but sometimes the structures of the roofs can be really challenging. One thing that you may want to look in is, we see this quite a bit in DC, is a parapet to parapet design, which obviates the racking, because oftentimes on a flat roof, what I didn't mention is it's a ballasted system. It's basically cinder blocks that weight the system down so that it doesn't fly off during a storm. There's no penetrations, but we have seen installations where they'll go from one parapet, which is this little sidewall, to the other. So that might be an option, maybe getting another quote it is a challenge. We have seen that quite a bit here in Richmond with some of those older houses, the structure not being able to accommodate the panels, but maybe a parapet to parapet design could work. That's a great question.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, and in my house in DC, I had a parapet installation where they just had a steel beam going around from one brick side to the other, and that worked fine. And also, of course, we have I'll include the email address here, but feel free to reach out to our team's email address, vateam@solarunitedneighbors.org, and Aaron and the rest of the team will be able to help answer those questions as well.
Yeah, great. That's a good example of our help desk, right? So if if the co-op is a fit or not, then we have some people that might give you some options. Thanks, Roger. All right, so
thanks. Yeah, no more questions for now.
Okay, thanks. Let's talk a little about EV chargers as part of the co-op. I like to think of solar as a local fuel. Charles talked a little bit about his decision after getting an EV to fuel his vehicle locally. Solar produces electricity, which is a fantastic fuel. If you think of all the things you can do, heat, cook, cool, pump water, run an electric vehicle, keep beer cold, these are important things. So what we've seen is that people that have EVs want to get solar, and people that have solar want to get EVs. So we've started offering electric vehicle chargers as part of the co-op offering. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those, just go into really not a lot of details. But a level 2 charger is a 240 volt outlet. In fact, there's kind of 3 different levels, although it's a misnomer. A level 1 charger is essentially, I'm looking at one right now, which is my 120 volt outlet. So if you think of the EV battery like a barrel of water, your level 1 charger would be like filling that barrel of water with your bathroom or your kitchen sink. You could do it, but it takes a little bit of time. Actually, on my EV, I have a small battery, so that level 1 charger works. What a level 2 charger does is it improves your charging speed more than 6 times than a standard 120 volt outlet. Depending on your vehicle, you might get 10 to 30 or 40 miles of charge per hour. And it'd be like if your battery was that barrel of water instead of a bathroom faucet, it'd be like your garden hose. Now there's level 3 industrial fast charging, which you see in commercial instances or along the interstate. That would be like filling your barrel of water with a fire hose. So this is in the middle. It's a faster charger. It's like a 240 volt outlet like you would have for your electric range or your dryer. The warranty of the unit itself is about 3 years, and there's a lot of different varieties and brands. Again, in the spirit of ensuring that you are a informed consumer, whether it be solar or EV charger, here's some questions that you might want to start answering or asking yourself. The first one is where? Am I going to need it in the interior, like a garage, or do I not have access to that interior space and it would be an exterior? You could see that there's different types. It would be a wall mount, like it's typical to a garage, or a pedestal, which you sometimes see in commercial instances. Also, a big factor is your electric service. So the typical amperage for an EV charger is between about 30 to 50 amps. So you want to make sure that you have enough room in terms of your circuit, your panels and your circuit breakers to accommodate that. A few other considerations are if you're in a commercial space, is it network capable, which means is it a smart charger? Can it communicate? Can people see it on the apps? A lot of the utility programs that incentivize charger require a network capability so that they can collect some of the data. Cord length, never underestimate cord length. There is no worse feeling than being about a foot short of being able to charge your car. I've had that happen to me at a party once, and it was not a fun thing. So actually the length of the cord can really affect the price of the charger itself and of course the usability. If you are in a business, are you going to make it publicly accessible? There are a number of apps that you can actually look and see, oh, I'm going to this restaurant, do they offer charging? But mostly for residential settings, you're not going to have to worry about that. Also aesthetics. So this is going to be an appliance in your home, maybe your garage. Is it going to be something that you're going to want to look at? Wait, you know what? Actually, well, I was supposed to have one more slide. I apologize for that. What I will talk about, in spite of not having the slides, is the economics. So what we see is that the price of the solar EV or the EV chargers is really affected by the type of installation, if they're going to have to run underground conduit, if it is an easy install in terms of your panel upgrades. So it really just depends. What we see is anywhere between about I think a total price about $1,000 to $2,000, and it's available as part of the co-op. But also you can do it with an electrician as well. Any electrician can do it. It just really is up to you. But oftentimes with our co-op pricing, if the installer's got an electrician out there wiring your solar panels, they can pass on a little bit of a discount in terms of an EV charger. So unless there's any questions regarding EV chargers, I'm going to go to solar economics.
No questions, thanks.
All right. Let's do this. So as I mentioned before, with Anya, my boss's story, they tried to go solar in 2007. It was 5 times the cost of what it is now. Solar prices have dropped 73% since 2010. And you think of it as a long-term investment. What you're doing is you're hedging against the price of electricity rising. And on average, you see about a 2 to 4% increase in costs in electricity annually. And that tracks, actually, I think Dominion prices are set to go up a little bit more than that if you're in Dominion territory. Again, you have no moving parts and a 25-year lifespan. I mentioned the warranties for the panels, 25-year plus. Most inverters 10 to 25-year warranties, as well as the workmanship warranties from installers anywhere between about 5 to 10 years. I mentioned the rising utility rates. In Virginia, the average ROI or return on investment is anywhere between 9 to 13 years. So that's typical of what you would take to recoup that investment. And remember, it's a 25-year plus system. It's a conservative estimate because you may get a really great price and your return on investment might be 7 or 8 years. But we like to err on being a little more conservative. So I'm going to talk you through this pricing sheet. And I think it's important that you understand a couple different things. First, how solar is priced. And then second of all, what are your revenue streams? How does it pay back? So the idea is that you can understand when you look at a proposal, what you're looking at in terms of pricing, and then what the revenue streams are that the installer is calculating so that you can calculate it on your own too. So you know exactly what you're looking at. So here, for example, we have a cash purchase. We'll talk about financing options in the next few slides. A 4 kilowatt and an 8 kilowatt system. So solar is priced by the watt, not by the panel. So that's a really important concept, right? You may have a proposal that has 21 panels or another one that has 23. What you're going to want to look at is the total kilowatts or system size. So a 4 kilowatt system is a 4,000 watt system, or an 8 kilowatt system is 8,000. So you would multiply that by your price per watt, which is in this case, $2.75, our average Virginia co-op pricing. So if you multiply $2.75 by 4,000 or 4 kilowatts, you get an $11,000 for your upfront price. Same with 8 kilowatts, it would just double to 22,000. So that's your price. And it can vary because some panel efficiencies are much higher. So you may have a 10 panel system that has 300 watt panels. That's a 3,000 or a 3 kilowatt system. Or you can have a 10 panel 400 watt system, which would be a 4,000 watts or 4 kilowatts. So again, it's based on the wattage. It's based on the total kilowatts. So what are your revenue streams? Again, how does your system pay back? So here in Virginia, we do not have a state tax credit like they do in other states. What we do have is a federal 30% tax credit. So this is a tax credit, not a deduction. It is, if you pay into federal taxes, then you can monetize that federal tax credit. So it is based on the year that you put your system into service. The old regime for the tax credit was having it step down. So a lot of people, for example, when I went solar, it was 26% and it was slated to go down to 22%. So a lot of people were trying to get their systems done before December so they didn't lose that 4%. The good news is that the 30% federal tax credit is going to remain for the next 10 years. It's a federal tax credit, as I mentioned before. You have to pay federal taxes to get into it. Common question is, what if I'm not paying, don't have a lot of tax liability one year? you can monetize it into subsequent years after you go solar in years that you pay more federal tax credits. So that's what you have for your net cost. Again, your primary or one of your sources of revenue is going to be your tax credit. The other one is going to be your electricity savings. And that, of course, is the electricity that your panels produce that you don't have to buy from the utility. So it's pretty easy. You can multiply the amount of kilowatt hours, which is the units of energy that your system produces annually, by the price of your utility kilowatt hour. So as the prices of electricity rise, the value of your electricity from solar is going to rise as well. So your electricity savings are going to be your other revenue stream. And you can see that we've calculated some estimated 10-year savings for both system sizes. The last revenue stream is going to be your solar renewable energy credit, or SREC, which is a production-based incentive. And it's a little bit hard to explain, whereas your federal tax credit is based on the investment, how much you spend on your system, and then 30% of that. A solar renewable energy credit is based on the production of your system. And it is based on what's called the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which basically is a rule that tells the utilities that they have to sell a certain percentage of their electricity from renewable energy resources, solar or wind. And if they don't meet that percentage, they have to pay what's called a non-compliance penalty. And here in Virginia, we do have a renewable portfolio standard that was based from the Virginia Clean Economy Act that passed in 2020 that give that little carve out and said, hey, utilities, you have to produce that percentage. So that's the background. What your solar renewable energy credit is, it'd be like if your solar system was a well of water. And for every 1,000 gallons of water that it produced, you get a little certificate that has a value. And that's the value that's saying, hey, we think it's great that you produce clean energy. The utilities weren't able to produce that energy, so we're going to give you that little value. And it is pretty modest here in Virginia. A 4 kilowatt system, you might have about 5 SRECs a year. 5 SRECs a year. And last time I checked, the price was about $40. So 4 times 5 is roughly about 200 if you're going to look at it annually. There are SREC brokers that you can get more of an upfront. They can give you the rights like to an annuity. It really just depends on how your installer works. But again, it's a pretty modest revenue stream that is going to help incentivize people to put solar on their roofs. Now, I mentioned that we fight for policy, and I'll tell you why this is important. So in Virginia, the current SREC price is $40, and a 4 kilowatt system might produce 5. In Washington, D.C., each SREC is $400. So just by having really favorable policy, what we're doing is we're incentivizing more solar. We're giving additional revenue streams. We're currently working on some legislation that hopefully will increase that carve out. There's been some discussion of it. So those are your revenue streams. Again, just to review, and I'm sure there'll be questions because there's always questions on this. Your system is priced by the watt. How do you determine your price? You multiply the price per watt times the system size. What are your revenue streams? How does your system pay back? And as a consumer, you should be looking at how your installer calculates that. Your federal tax credit, which applies only if you pay federal taxes. And then your electricity savings based on the estimated annual production of your system and the price that you pay your utility for those kilowatt hours. So I'm going to stop here and take just a quick breather and see if there's any questions before we get to the next slide. And then we've got Ruth that's going to be coming on and talking about low, moderate income solar.
Thanks, Aaron. Question from Kendall. Yeah. Is all the energy that you produce used per day? If you don't use up your energy one day, is it sent to the grid? Do you get to carry it over?
That's a great question. Yeah. So if you produce an excess of electricity, I did today, I wasn't home until that electricity or those credits of the kilowatt hours that you produce is going to be carried over to either times of low production, like at night. So for example, I produced a surplus today, but the sun's not shining. I'm taking that surplus with my heater and stuff like that. if you have, in fact, well, I'm not going to go to the other slides, but if you have a surplus from month to month, like let's just say you use 300 kilowatt hours of electricity one month, but you produce 400. So you have that surplus of 100 kilowatt hours, that's going to apply to your next month. And the best way I can explain it, and this might date me a little bit, is rollover minutes. When cell phone carriers used to do rollover minutes, if you didn't use all your minutes, it would apply to the next month. That's what it is. That's a great question. And we have a lot of resources on net metering. That's really important.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. I'm going to talk about financing options. As I mentioned before, the federal tax credit is going to extend to 10 years. And that was thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. Financing options, a lot of people do home equity lines of credit, refinance and include solar. That's what I did. I refied and took out a home improvement loan. There are other types of loans. Oftentimes credit unions can offer very competitive loans. Installer may offer a couple companies in which they finance through. So some of the advantages is it's in-house. It makes it easy for you. And co-op members have access to loans from Clean Energy Credit Union or Community First Credit Union. We have an arrangement through there for Solar United Neighbors. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Ruth Amundsen, who is a great solar advocate, and she's going to talk about low-income solar. And it's like the question is how do we get it to make it accessible to everybody regardless of income? Ruth.
Thanks, Aaron. So my name is Ruth Amundsen. I'm actually in Norfolk, but I've financed systems all over Virginia. And what I offer is a way to get the solar without paying any money out of pocket. And I'll show you the guidelines on the next slide. But by Virginia law, if you qualify as low income, you can sign what's called a power purchase agreement, which means that I would buy the solar and you would pay me for that solar that's generated out of your savings on your Dominion bill. My goal, I own about 16 solar installs at this point, and my goal is always to keep people net zero cost. You pay no money out of pocket when the solar is installed, and the only money you pay to me is what you've saved on your Dominion bill. So we did a lot of installs under Norfolk Solar, and I now have a company, Sunspots, that does this on homes. And the normal term, it depends a little bit on what kind of cost gets worked out from the co-op. But my terms on these power purchase agreements have been 7 to 10 years. And can you give me the next slide? So that the table there shows the guidelines that you would have to be under for me to be able to do a power purchase agreement with your household. That's a picture, actually, the first house we did in this, which was in South Norfolk. But basically, if you're a household of a single person, your income, and this is taxable income, would have to be under $52,000. If you're a household of 4, your total household income, again, the taxable income, would have to be under $74,000. And so if you are under those limits, I'd love to talk to you and finance the solar on your home. And you can still be part of the co-op, and you can still be one of the ones who decides which installer gets selected. The only difference is that I would be providing the money for the install on your house. And Aaron, I think you had one more slide for me. Yeah. So the way it works is I first need to know how much you're currently paying for electricity, because it does vary a little bit from different regions. And so you would give me just the first page of any Dominion bill, and then both myself and the solar installer can see how much you're using and how much you're paying for electricity. And from that, I can propose what kind of power purchase agreement we would write. It's a very simple one-page agreement, and I can give you contacts with the homeowners I've done before, so that people understand this is very simple. I'm not trying to make it a bunch of legalese. It's a one-page agreement. Basically says I will buy the solar and own it and take the tax credits. And at the end of the term, usually about 8 years, you would get the solar, and then you get all the savings for the electricity. And then once that PPA is signed, you're part of the co-op. The solar gets installed, the same as the regular co-op homes. and you would be paying me for that electricity out of the savings on your Dominion bill. And I only bill quarterly so that you have 3 months to save up, you know, those savings to make the bill that I send. And happy to answer questions if there's any in the chat.
Roger, any questions? I actually have a couple questions.
Yeah.
No questions for me. Thanks.
So is this only good if my utility is Dominion? Because there might be some people that might be in electric cooperative territory in this region.
No, it is legal with the other installers. I have not personally done a home yet that was not in Dominion territory, but I'm actually looking at doing some homes in the beginning of next year that are in APCO territory. And it should be the same process.
Okay, great. But not electric cooperatives, right? Is that?
I actually haven't had any inquiries from there, so I haven't looked up the rules. So I don't know, sorry.
You're good. The other question, so just to make it simple, so if I did this PPA, what I would be paying you would still be typically less than what I would be paying my regular Dominion bill. Is that what you're aiming for?
Yes, definitely.
All right.
And
yeah.
we take into account the fact that you're still going to be paying, even if you go for 100% of your, you know, an array that makes 100% of your Dominion bill, you will still have to pay the fixed charge from Dominion. And I do the calculation such that your fixed bill from Dominion plus my bill is going to be less than you're currently paying. And the other advantage is it's fixed for the term. So your electric bill would not go up for the next 8 years. And I can pretty much guarantee that if you just have Dominion, that it would go up. So the rate that we charge would stay the same for 8 years.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you, Ruth. And I assume you're going to share your contact information in the chat if people are interested.
Yeah, and just see a question in the chat. Yeah, it doesn't matter if the household income increases after the agreement is signed. It's only based on whatever tax year is current. So nobody's filed 2023 yet, so it would be based on your 2022 tax form. It doesn't matter if the next year you get a huge job and make more. It's just the 1 year of tax forms that I would need to verify the household income. And I'll share that website and email right now.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you. It's an awesome program. So we are at time, and just what do I do next? So we really encourage you to join the co-op. Roger posted the link to join the co-op. Again, it's no obligation. Also, if you know any of your friends and neighbors that might be interested in it, again, it's no obligation if they're looking into solar. And if it's a good fit, really help us grow. We're at 29 people right now. Our goal is well over 50 or 75 people. So we really depend on organic word of mouth to help us grow these groups. And, you know, if you have an environmental or a neighborhood listserv, I encourage you to put that link out there. And as I mentioned before, we're going to be selecting the installer. The co-op members are going to be selecting the installer the 14th of December, and then installations are going to begin. And you also have the option for the low moderate income. So if there's any other questions, I can stop now. But it looks like we are going to be closing out. Anything else, Roger?
No, that's it. Thanks so much.
No, thank you all. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Ruth, Charles. And again, wanted to thank our partners at City of Richmond and Veridiant. And you know how to get a hold of us. Thank you again for spending your evening with us. Now on to Monday Night Football, right? Have a good one. Take care.